Hello and welcome. You're listening to Cognogs, a career ed podcast where each fortnight I give a guest free professional career coaching, whether they like it or not. And along the way we share our own career stories, engage with the politics and pedagogy of career education, and explore one little corner of the ever-changing world of work. My name is Rob Cooper. I'm a careers leader and a registered career development professional. I have an interest in careers education, and if you're trying to be an adult in this liquid world, so do you. Episode 1. Small, fierce, determined. This week I'm talking to Shelly Cozens. Shelly has recently been made Head of Careers and Cultural Capital at her school in Somerset. To put this interview into context, Shelly and I had never met before, and this was my first interview for the show. As it turns out, I couldn't have asked for a better guest to start out with. She was eager to talk and bursting with ideas. There you are. Hi.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
How are you doing?
I'm good. I've just been writing reports.
That time of year.
Well, that lovely time of year, which is quite difficult when you've only taught them for half a year.
Yeah, quite tricky. And a little bit sad as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a bit. There are some students that were so close to being amazing.
Yeah.
And they kind of turned it around. You think, it's really sad that they didn't kind of have that extra time to show me just how amazing they could really be. So,
Yeah. Very strange times. And kind of how does lockdown suit you? What's it like for you?
Lockdown's quite hard, in all fairness, because we've got 3 children.
Yeah.
Who are 14, 8 and 3.
Yeah.
And the age gap never seemed to be a big thing until lockdown.
Yeah.
Because you could do things that kind of entertained all of them. But now it's really hard because working with one is different to working with another. And then the 3-year-old wants to destroy the place. So I'm really glad that he's with his childminder just for like 3 hours a couple of times a week, just so that I see that an article on Test today about, all these parents not engaging with their children's learning. I'd like to engage an awful lot more, but actually...
It's not that easy, is it?
It's not. And then I've got my head of department, who's our union rep at school as well, saying, well, if you've got the children at home, you're not expected to do this, that and the other. I'm like, yeah, but that's kind of not fair on the children that I teach as well. So it's that difficulty of being...
I think you're about to meet one of my kids.
I banned mine.
Yeah, well, mine are all adults. I've got 3 kids as well, but it's my youngest's birthday today.
Wow!
And my youngest is 19, which it just doesn't compute really. I don't feel like I'm anywhere near old enough for that.
No, I'm in complete denial because our eldest is 15 this year. I'm like, that can't be a thing. I don't think I'm ready to have a 15-year-old. And then I think, well, September next year, our youngest is going to school, and I'm definitely not ready for that. He has to be a baby forever in my head.
So I am recording.
Okay.
Once it's ready to go out, I will send you a copy before it goes out, just so you know I'm not kind of taking your words out of context. The plan is I'm going to follow some kind of loose career development kind of framework. A couple of things that I do in terms of what they call micro skills. There will be times where I leave quite a bit of a pause after what you've said. And that's just a way of getting you to talk a bit more. But the trouble with the technology is that unless I'm kind of waving my hands frantically to show that the connection's still live, it can sometimes make people feel like, kind of, hello, are you still there? Have we crashed? So I don't know how successful that one will be. I might chip in occasionally just to signal. I mean, I'm guessing that in the podcast there'll only be me and you ever listen to it.
No, but, loads of people.
You can hope.
Loads of people will. I didn't even tell my husband until this morning. I was like, we're recording a podcast today. And he's like, wow, that's amazing.
So I might I kind of chip in and signpost to people kind of what I'm doing and why I'm asking questions and things. So you're happy what we're doing? Yeah, you ready to get kind of started?
Yeah, let's do it.
From a practitioner's point of view, we've come to the end of what we might call phase one, where we've simply tried to welcome the individual and establish some effective communication. I've tried to use some rapport to build trust. Shelly is very warm and very open and a very easy person to communicate with. So there's no need to press this section any further. We're about 5 minutes in. I've already sent Shelly, as I do with all my guests, some information about what I'm going to do with the podcast, giving them some rights to have a final listen to the final edit. So in terms of confidentiality and the ethics of what we're doing, we're in a good space now to move on. So next stage of this is just inviting you to tell your story. Now, start where you feel comfortable. But I think for me, a starting point would be, I put out this random tweet saying I've got an idea for a podcast, and I've never met you. I've never heard. Well, I think you followed me previously. That's probably how I ended up on your feed. And you stuck your hand up and said yes.
Yeah.
So what was going on there? What was the motivation?
Because Twitter is a completely new thing for me. I had an account years ago and I couldn't understand Twitter. Didn't understand what it was all about. It wasn't Facebook, so I didn't quite get it. And I thought, right, okay, it's lockdown and there is apparently this world out there of resources and amazing people who want to share things and want to interact. And CPD hasn't been a thing for me for a long time because primarily of school funding. Paying for teachers to go on courses isn't a thing, especially because then there are cover implications. And so we've had in-house CPD for an awfully long time, but no opportunity really to interact with other people and share resources. Yeah. And so I logged onto Twitter and I set up a new account. And 3 months later, I've got nearly 1,000 followers, and I have learned so much and I have met so many amazing people. I've shared resources, and my confidence within myself as a professional is growing massively. And that it's just a fantastic opportunity that you shouldn't pass up as a professional. So I saw it and I thought, yeah, actually, I've just become head of careers and cultural capital at my school. And I thought, yeah, I want to interact with other people who are like-minded and have ideas about how to promote careers within schools. And so I thought, yeah, let's do this.
So you mentioned there, you've recently become head of careers and cultural capital. I hope we get a chance to talk about that. The cultural capital bit, because I think
the cultural capital bit is controversial.
I think in the current climate that's well worth unpicking.
Yes.
So we might get there in a bit. But head of careers, you're an English teacher, yes?
Yes, I am.
And you're still...
Yeah, I qualified in 2008.
Okay.
As an English teacher.
Yeah. So you're still an English teacher?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll still be an English teacher. Reduced timetable, so they're pulling me out of English a little bit more. I think I've got something like 10 PPA slots now.
Yeah.
And reduced time with my form group twice a week, so that I've got that extra time to do the role.
Okay. So how did that role come about?
We have a deputy head who's very busy and was a deputy head in charge of teaching and learning from the point of view that he was it was a temporary post.
Yeah.
They made it permanent, and the advert came out and I thought, what a fantastic opportunity. What a fantastic way to have that extra level of impact. Teaching English is a massive thing anyway for all students, because I'm going to say I'm an English teacher, let's be controversial. If you haven't got English, then the skills you need in every other subject, regardless. So English is a big one. But for me, it was the opportunity to use the skills I've gathered over the last few years to do something a little bit different, and to encourage people. And the cultural capital bit, having done sociology and psychology for A level,
Yeah.
I actually knew what cultural capital was. And in our department group chat, people were like, what's cultural capital?
Yeah.
What is that? And having spoken to other members of staff, a lot of people didn't know what it actually meant. And they were quite put off by the idea because they didn't know. So there has been the suggestion, have I got a real job or have I just got a job with a made up title? That's really reassuring. But I just think from a careers point of view, I actually started off, when I decided I wanted to be a teacher, I needed experience. And before I could apply, universities were saying, right, this is great, but you need some classroom experience. So when I was doing the final year of my degree, I joined the Reaching Higher, Reaching Wider partnership. I think it's changed its name slightly, but it's in the Welsh universities predominantly. And I went into a local high school and I started working with children who had no background of higher or further education within their families. Yeah. And it was an aspirational mentoring program. I think what really struck me is that there were some children who genuinely, all they aspired to in life was to sit on the sofa every day and watch Jeremy Kyle. And they were quite open about that. And I felt quite sad at that point, because there is a whole world out there waiting to be explored. And some of them just didn't realise their potential and didn't realise what they were capable of. So it's always been really important to me that people realise what they can do with their qualifications and where they can go. And now living in Somerset, I taught in Bridgewater. I've taught in Bridgewater for the last 7 years before I moved to my current school. And some students genuinely believe that life begins and ends at junction 24 and junction 23, either side of Bridgewater.
Yeah.
And they are not aware of the opportunities that there are out there. And for me, I think it's really important that students realise that they make the most of every opportunity and they take the opportunities that are available to them. So the opportunity to do this role in a new school, who actually offer completely different things to anything that I've been to. You know, our school offers agriculture as a GCSE.
Yeah.
First school I've ever worked in that offers that as a GCSE, but we look at what our demographic is and who our students are and what their background is, and actually a vast proportion of them come from the farming community with a farming background. So capitalise on that and offer them something that they can get a qualification in.
Yeah, totally.
So, and I think that's really important, because some degrees are absolutely fantastic, but I got to the end of my degree and realised very quickly it was great, I had a degree, but it didn't qualify me to do anything.
Yeah.
And so having those transferable skills, I had to do a PGCE to become a teacher. And sometimes it's about tracking it back. Nobody ever sat down with me when I was at school and said, right, okay, well, what do you want to do with this degree? If you do this, this is what you'll need to do to enter the world of work. So it's about preparing them for a future that they're not too sure on at this particular moment in time. So hopefully I'll be able to do something to make a difference to some of them.
Yeah, fab. You're already sounding like a careers lead. That's great. Yeah, that's great. So why did you start off as an English teacher?
I actually went to Cardiff University and did a degree in journalism, film and broadcasting.
Yeah.
And the intention was always to be a Formula One journalist. And in my head, I was going to travel the world for, 50, 52 weeks of the year. I was going to have an apartment in Monte Carlo, and I was going to be living the life.
Yeah.
Only as is the case with life generally, it throws you these curveballs. And towards the second year of my degree, I fell pregnant with my first daughter. She wasn't planned. She was a happy accident, and I wouldn't change it for the world. But then I realised that actually there was a career that at the time wasn't going to be accessible for me because I had a young child to care for. So I thought, what else am I good at? What can I do? And I loved learning. Absolutely adored being at school. I didn't adore college because of the college I went to, but learning was the big thing. And so I thought, right, okay, I really enjoyed school. And if I could help other people to enjoy their learning as much as I did, yeah, let's do that. And so I looked into the opportunity to do my teacher training. I went back to university when Shannon was 10 months old.
Yeah.
I finished the final year of my degree. I went straight into my PGC after, and then straight into a full-time English teaching job the year after that. So for any child that I teach, I wouldn't ever recommend having a child so early in life, because it's tough and it's hard. But I think what I want children to know is that anything is possible.
Yeah.
And people will put barriers in front of you. My own mum even told me when I ended up pregnant that I was never going to finish my degree. I was never going to move forward. I'd become a baby making machine. And actually, for me, it was like, actually, I'm going to prove you wrong, because I have so much to give. I have this level of intelligence and I'm determined. And I hope that my children see that regardless of the background you come from or the challenges that are put in your way, if you want to succeed, you can. You might have to work for it, but the opportunities are definitely there.
Yeah, fantastic. And a great example to those kinds of students. You know, whatever life throws at you, it's never a full stop. You know, that there are always opportunities that come about because of it. So you didn't end up following Formula One around the world, but you did end up doing something else that was, well, for a lot of people, more important and certainly of equal value.
Yeah, definitely.
Are you still a petrol head?
Yes. Although Formula One just got a little bit too predictable.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do. I love it. My husband actually races for the Royal Navy, Royal Marines off-road team.
Yeah.
Manager. So a petrol head in a slightly different way, in that we do a lot of off-roading.
Yeah.
And I used to help out as a teenager at the Yamaha off-road experience as well. So I learned a bit about motorbikes along the way. So yeah, I just do a little bit of everything and something that's a bit different. But tractors are the big favourite in this house.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little bit diverse. You know, one of those people that they say, "Oh, you're really interested in that," and yeah, just try something different.
Yeah.
Try something new.
So does the kind of interest in motorsport, is that a long running family thing? Did that come through your parents?
Yes.
Or, yeah.
My granddad,
right,
actually was a petrol head from a very, very young age, and we actually have a motorbike accident to thank for the fact that we are even in existence in our family.
Okay.
My nan was a nurse, and after my granddad had a particularly horrific accident, she nursed him, and they fell in love.
Wow.
And the rest is history. It's always been a big thing, and it's just in complete contrast to the epic amounts of reading and things like that I do. There's kind of the extremes there. You know? Yeah,
it is a real contrast. And it's interesting that you kind of mentioned the reading there, because I've got lots of questions kind of forming in my head. And one of them was about how do you place yourself in terms of being an English teacher?
I always feel a little bit like a fake as an English teacher because when I came to select my A-levels, I was quite adamant that I didn't want to do literature.
Yeah.
And actually, despite the fact I've been an English teacher for a lot of years now, my last literature qualification was for GCSE. I have no further qualification past GCSE. I've got A-level English language. They still employ me, so they must see something.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I did A-level English language. And when I was at university, obviously there was language was the big thing with the journalism. And then when I went into my third year, there were professional writing modules. So language is something that I've done a lot of, but literature, I've had to teach myself.
Yeah.
I think, well, maybe I am a bit of a fraud because I haven't done this A level in literature that I think that I should do.
Yeah.
But I've always had just a desire to do different things. When I first joined my previous school, joined there in September 2012, and it was on a temporary contract. And I desperately wanted this permanent contract. And having a discussion with the head teacher at the time, she's like, well, what other subjects can you teach? It's like, well, I've got A levels in history and sociology and psychology. And she said, oh, psychology. We used to teach that at my last school. I was like, oh, okay. And a couple of months later, the contract still hadn't been made permanent, and I got an email from the deputy head saying, please, can you come to see me at the end of the day? So there was much horror in the office. What have you done? What have you done? And I went into her office at the end of the day, and she said, right, I'm going to ask you to do something now. But before I ask you, I just want to make it clear, there is no guarantee that this course is running. There is no guarantee that this course will have you involved in it. But would you please make us a board for psychology for our options evening later in the week? So I had like 2 days. And I just said, yeah, okay. And I literally I didn't know anything about the syllabus. I'd done it for A level, but not GCSE. So this was a whole new thing. So in 2 days, I put together a board advertising GCSE psychology. And that day, the day of the options evening, I had to leave school early because my middle daughter had her 1-year injections. And I got called to the head's office. And again, you have this moment of, oh no.
Yeah, what have I done?
And I kind of got handed this envelope, and she said, oh, you know, congratulations. And my friend, who was also on a temporary contract, got given an envelope. We're like, oh wow, we've got permanent jobs. That's great. And I'm like, right, I really need to go now. So thanks for this, but I've got somewhere else to be. So as I'm running out to the car, I open my envelope and I look, and it's like, oh my God, I'm a head of department. There was a letter saying, you know, congratulations. And now all of a sudden I was head of a psychology department. So how did that happen? So by the age of 27, I was there, parent to 2 beautiful girls, and a head of department as well. And that in itself was a roller coaster, because the following year I took on another kind of like 53 students, and then had to take on a member of staff. So the opportunities are there. So from an English point of view, I've been digressing for quite some time and doing different things. So I've done that. I've taught drama.
Yeah.
I've done quite a bit of drama. I think I might be going back to drama next year as well. I have done the PSHC curriculum, as most teachers do as well, but I've done history. I've done RS. What else have I done? The odd bit of geography here and there. So I just think it's really important as a teacher, you can diversify.
Yeah.
And you can do different things.
You're a real good example of what they're calling careers kind of theory, happenstance. You kind of represent that entirely, that you are clearly always open to opportunities, and you put yourself out there, and whether consciously or subconsciously, you are always on the lookout for something. There aren't many closed doors to you, and there aren't many things that you wouldn't consider.
No, I mean,
doing.
The week that I got the careers job, I'd been called for 2 interviews that week, because I'd gone for the head of house position as well. Yeah. Well, head of year position in our school. Yeah. There's just so much more that I want to do. And I love being a classroom teacher. Being a classroom teacher is amazing, but I just think there are so many different opportunities out there. So why wouldn't you take them? Why wouldn't you go for these opportunities?
In this section, Shelley clearly feels very comfortable talking to me, and the time that we spent in the first 5 or so minutes establishing that rapport has clearly helped, and she's given some quite personal accounts of her journey through life and her backstory, I suppose is what we might call it. In terms of micro skills, you can see from that section that I spend a lot of the time silent. I did introduce that in the opening section to say that I would leave her lots of space for her to be able to talk, and clearly that was an effective approach with her. There are a couple of occasions where I've used some kind of pondering. I wanted to ask her some challenging questions, but I didn't want them to come across as being challenging. It wasn't meant to be any kind of interrogation. So I've kind of posted my questions as kind of musings to draw her into that, and that's been quite effective in this situation. One thing from a careers point of view that I should point out, I did refer to the theory of happenstance. To be clear, I should have said the theory of planned happenstance. Happenstance is the kind of chaotic, random events that happen, whereas the theory in careers of planned happenstance, which Shelley clearly represents here, is that we can put ourselves into a position where we can increase our opportunities of those random events happening. And I suppose in simple terms, we put ourselves out there, which Shelley talks about quite a lot in this section. In the next section, we should be moving on to kind of agreeing a major topic that we're going to talk about in a little bit more detail. And what you'll find from the next section is that getting Shelley to focus on one topic is a little bit more of a challenge for me. I'm hoping this next question is going to lead us on to part 3. What is the difference between careers education and education?
I think careers education has to show you how you can use the skills that you've learned in your formal education to move further forward. There has to be that link. I was that child that used to sit there with my hand up in my maths lessons, probably for the last 2 years of school, going, this is great. When am I going to use it when I leave school? And I think that has to be, you have to see the purpose in what you're studying. It's difficult in English sometimes when they've got 15 poems that they need to learn and they need to know about the context and the structure and the language. They'll do it because they know that they need to pass the exam. But I think we need to have a much clearer link on why we're doing what we're doing. It's sad that education's got to the point where we're not necessarily teaching them about a subject, we are teaching them how to pass an exam. And that's really sad, because you need to have those transferable skills and you need to see the purpose in what you're doing. Otherwise, they lose interest. And that's really sad. So for me, careers education is that next step. And that's something that I'm really keen to develop this year. We have guest speakers come in. We have some fantastic guest speakers and they tell you all about the job. But the bit that I really want to enhance is, how do you get from here to here? How do you get to that? But what do you actually have to do? Almost like having a checklist of, if I want to do this job, then these are the courses that could be useful for me, or these are the skills, or, you know, these are the hobbies that I could try that would help bridge that gap. So I see careers as being a very skills based, and the transferring of the skills.
Are you familiar with Gatsby and the compass tools and things like that? Do you school go through all that?
Yeah, compass tool is something that I've got training on later on today. And Gatsby, yes, you know, for me, Gatsby had a completely different meaning. Actually, that's really weird. I've got over here. Oh my God,
you got the Great Gatsby. Yeah.
To me, when I was first doing it, I was like, well, that's not the same thing, clearly. There's so much amazing stuff out there online, though. There are some wonderful schools that are kind of sharing, you know, how they do it, how they implement it. And it was interesting reading. And as part of my presentation for my job interview, I had to go through how I felt that the school was kind of meeting all of these Gatsby benchmarks.
Yeah.
And kind of saying what I would do to improve it as I went through. So Gatsby obviously underpins everything that we do. It has to.
Yeah.
I am really keen to introduce the Young Enterprise scheme. The stuff that they can do for Gatsby is absolutely fantastic. And one of my new jobs that I have to do, so much I've got to do, so much. So our PSHCE curriculum is kind of divided down, and I'm now in charge of the economic element of it as well. That's a bit scary. So I've been asked to look at that curriculum as well, and look at what we can do, what we can introduce. Do we need to tweak some of the lessons to make it engaging? And one thing that I've noticed on Twitter, there have been a few questions that have gone out lately. What do you wish that you learned at school that you went into the adult world not knowing anything about? And so many people have said managing finances.
Yeah.
And so many people have kind of said about, how mortgages work. I'm terrified of mortgages. I just say to my husband, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
But again, at school, that wasn't something I ever did. And I think it's really important as part of being a grown-up, learning about financing, banking, credit cards, loans. It's an absolute minefield. And I think the country is getting itself into such a mess because people just aren't educated on it. And so it comes back to the idea of skills again as well, from a careers point of view. If you're wanting to set up your own business, you need to know how to manage your finances as well. And I have some of them, I'm like, do you really think that if you speak to an employer like this, that you're going to have a job for very long? At which point I was told, no, it doesn't matter, miss, I'm going to start my own business anyway.
Yeah.
I think, okay, that's fine, but you still need these skills.
Yeah.
And it's still going to be important. So yeah, everything is planned. And like I say, because I like the planning and I like to do the strategic things, that's all part of the Gatsby planning that I've got in place.
Okay, that's good. So when you went for your interview and you had to kind of present on how your school was meeting those Gatsby benchmarks, where did you kind of assess the challenges for your school? What are the weaker areas?
We're good at getting people into apprenticeships, and we have like a higher level of apprenticeships. What we are finding though is that our higher end students are actually the ones that are missing out, which seems quite ridiculous. But making children aware of the opportunity to go to university is quite a challenge, especially in Somerset. I think we're the only county in England that doesn't have its own university.
Right, I didn't know that. That's really interesting.
We're the only county. I mean, we're surrounded by, obviously, Bristol's not far away. You've got Exeter, you've got Bath, you've got Plymouth.
Yeah.
So we are surrounded, but as a county, we're the only county in England without its own university, which is sad. And they don't necessarily then realise what is on offer to them. Yeah. And what they can potentially do.
It's also a bit of a challenge for students as well, isn't it? Because the kind of pattern nowadays is that more and more students are staying at home. They're staying closer to home. They're not traveling as far away for all sorts of financial reasons. Mm-hmm. So for students in Somerset, you've got to make decisions that are kind of against the national trends. So, I do have to move away. And you were talking earlier about your experience in Bridgewater of those kids who felt that the world ended at I think you said Junction 24.
Motorway junctions. That's it. Nothing happens past them.
It's a bit of a flat Earth theory that that's the end of the world and you fall off the end. Yes. So that's an interesting kind of contextual difficulty for you to overcome, and it also makes it harder in terms of meeting that Gatsby benchmark and ticking that box and making sure that all your students have had those experiences of higher education, because it just makes it a much bigger trip out. I know you like organising things, but it's a bigger coach trip, isn't it?
It is. I mean, Exeter University, absolutely fantastic. They have got some wonderful things through the university on offer. Yeah. And that's something that I'm definitely going to explore. A little bit further afield in Plymouth as well. So people do, I suppose Somerset is one of those because of the lovely M5 corridor that we've got. Travelling to universities is perhaps easier in that respect. So we live in Taunton. Getting on a train to Bristol, you can be in Bristol in 20 minutes. Yeah. So although it is a little bit of travelling a little bit further away, I think they perhaps have to contextualise that when I was at university in Cardiff, I lived in Penarth, so I was just outside of Cardiff. But it used to take me 45 minutes to get from where I lived into the university campus. And even for those that are living in student housing, there is still that kind of travel element. So there is the potential for people to travel and still live at home. I just think that we need to explore, but even at the really top end, and that seems to be in the school that I'm working in now and my previous school, we quite rightly put a lot of emphasis on our pupil premium students and boosting their opportunities, which is where the cultural capital element comes in. But one thing we need to be able to do is to stretch and challenge our top end as well. Yeah. Because they have fantastic opportunities open to them. And again, they might not always necessarily realise what they're capable of. And so I look back to when I was at college and I went to Old Trafford to the Oxbridge seminars. Yeah. And I kind of went there and I looked and I was like, okay, no thanks. I decided it wasn't for me. And it wasn't necessarily something that I wanted to do, and I got the grades I could have gone. Yeah. But I decided that my future lay elsewhere. But I think that our top end students also deserve to be pushed so that they can go and achieve what they can potentially achieve as well. So we can't, sometimes we get our focus on a particular group or a particular, demographic. Yeah. And the whole point of inclusive education is that everybody is included. Yeah. And so with the cultural capital element of it, I want to make sure that people on the whole spectrum get the opportunities that are relevant to them.
And that's your benchmark 3, isn't it? That's meeting the needs of every student. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so to recap a few of those things that are going on, in no particular order. Clearly, there are some issues around work experience, simply because of the kind of current economic climate. And I've been to careers leader meetings, Zoom meetings recently, where schools are already making the decision to scrap work experience entirely next academic year. I think that will partly be driven by GCSE subject leaders who don't want to lose their students for significant periods of time when they've already lost them for this months. You are taking on the economic element of the PSHE program. Which you've already described yourself as being terrified of mortgages. Was that the phrase? And then leading on economic education. So that's an interesting challenge. You've got some contextual challenges around not having a university in the county, and some related kind of contextual challenges around students who think that the world is a very small place and this is where they are and they belong here and they're not going to kind of venture out too much. What are the challenges? Challenges around those kind of career fair events that you have, you pull a lot of people in, and with social distancing and things like that, how do we make that work? So you talked about how you've got a very supportive leadership team, and your leadership team aren't expecting you to go in and shake everything up all at once and change everything. So I suppose that filters us down to, where is your focus? What's the first thing that you're going to go in and say, okay, I'm going to have my eye on this, and this is what we're going to do?
For me, at this particular moment in time, I want to get them that hands-on experience in a slightly different way. I want to start making links with local businesses.
Yeah.
And so that we can develop this work experience. The idea for us is still that work experience will happen for year 10 next year. I will be sending out a letter to year 9 before the summer holidays. And their challenge, if you like, over the summer holidays will be to start thinking about where they would like to go on work experience next year. The earlier, I know it's really difficult, and it is the great unknown, because we don't know how the COVID thing is going to pan out, how long it's going to be with us, are we going to get a vaccine? We don't know.
Yeah.
So to a certain degree, life still has to go on. And we will be doing that. And another thing that I'm introducing as part of the Careers and Cultural Capital role is a tutor time programme. We have 4 key values within our school, and what I am currently developing is so we've got care is one thing, aspiration is another, we've got determination and respect as our key values. And so what I am trying to do is design a programme around those key values.
Yeah.
Because I think they underpin everything that you're going to need within your career as well as you go forward. But developing this tutor programme, again, giving them the skills that they need as they go through. So care, I've broken down into 2 different parts. So for the first part, it'll be care for themselves.
Yeah.
And what they can do for their emotional well-being, because they're going to need it when they go back. There's no doubt about that. Then my second idea is kind of care within the community. So the idea is to link up with one of the local nursing homes and develop, hopefully by Christmas, children going in, and kind of our choir and our band, having the opportunity to work with various charities, opening their eyes to what's going on in the wider world. They need to become well-rounded citizens. They need to be good people, and by making them realise the importance of these skills, hopefully they'll see again how they can transfer into the workplace and how it will make a difference. Because so often you're not just employing somebody to do a job and to get a job done. You need to know how to interact with the people that you're working with, whether they be fellow professionals, whether they be your customers, your clients, whatever role that it is that you're doing. There's a much bigger picture. So there's kind of that element to it. Ultimately, I would like to also change the way the careers days are set out a little bit. We have fantastic people coming in from like a wide range of different backgrounds. The problem is sometimes that they do their job, they're fantastic at their job, but they aren't used to delivering sessions to teenagers. And some of the sessions are fantastic. The interactive sessions are amazing, where sometimes we've had like dance, music, drama, that's great. But then there have been other people who've come in and talked at them for half an hour. And you can tell, and this is no disrespect to them at all, because we all have our specialist areas. But delivering a presentation to a group of teenagers is a tough audience.
It is, absolutely.
It's really, really tough. I just sit there at the back of the room sometimes and my heart breaks for them, because I think you're prepared for this. So I think that is an element that we perhaps need to address, is to make sure. We're quite lucky in Somerset. There are a few organisations who specifically supply people to do careers days such as this.
Yeah.
So we kind of need to do that, but it's just kind of making sure that it all makes sense, because sometimes it's quite complex, the things that they do. So yeah, I think what I would like to see is working alongside the different subject areas as well, and I'd like each subject to kind of suggest, and I love the idea of the posters and the postcards, if you study this subject and this is the job that you could potentially do.
Yeah.
So I've got a display plan so people can see these links and things like that. So not massively revolutionary things straight away, but little things that I can start to do just to bring it to more of the forefront.
Yeah.
I think that's important. So
but bringing in your tutor program and those values is really interesting, and it'll help to break down that barrier between what people think of as work experience and what people think of as experience of work, and kind of clubbing those together. You don't have to go in and work somewhere to have an experience of work. You go in and you read to old people in the community, and you are experiencing a workplace in just as valuable a way.
Yeah, I think work experience, my previous school scrapped it completely. And I know that it's going to be a big thing to coordinate. But in the grand scheme of things, I think they can get so much from it.
Yeah.
Where I went to a place called Hawkstone Park Follies for my work experience, age 15. And after my 16th birthday, after I finished my GCSEs, I was working 40 hours a week there.
Right. Wow.
I worked there for 7 years afterwards, in between kind of like college and university and things like that. But it gave me, and you think, right, okay, so that was working in a tea room and working a shop and running around caves dressed as an Easter bunny and Santa's elf for a considerable amount of time as well. But the skills that it gave me in being able to interact with people and alter your interactions, whether you were talking with a difficult customer or a 3-year-old child, the skills that you can learn are massive.
Yeah.
And no, it wasn't what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And I think that's really difficult with work experience sometimes, is finding a placement that is worthwhile.
Yeah.
Because for some, there are, certainly in the area that I grew up, the local newspapers have stopped taking anybody on work experience.
Yeah.
They just won't take people. And so for those students who perhaps do want to become journalists, where do they go? Where do they get the experience? Where do they get these skills? So yeah, experiencing the world of work on whatever scale it is, even if it's not necessarily what you decide that you want to do with your life, ultimately you can still learn so much from having to be somewhere on time and
absolutely
interacting. I think there is so much, because sometimes at school they're kind of cocooned and they know, oh well, if I'm late I'll get a detention.
Yeah.
Whereas in the world of work, it's very different.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's very different. So I'm actually quite looking forward to being able to go out and do the visits. I love doing the visits. The visits are so much fun when you get to actually go and see them in a completely different way. I've been to local schools, local garages before now, so it'd be quite interesting for me to kind of venture out and go and see where everybody is as well.
Okay, I'm going to share something that's in my head. I hope you don't mind. Is there anything you don't love? Because you're coming across. I've asked some questions about what's the one thing that what's this, and the answers coming back are very rarely one thing. So we spoke about, what's the one thing, you've got the supportive leadership team, you don't have to change everything. What's the one thing you want to do? And I think you've just gone through 4 or 5 things that is the one thing that you're going to do, which is brilliant. But how are you going to rein in your enthusiasm so that you can identify the one place where you're going to have the most impact?
I think the most important thing that I can do is actually gauge what the students want.
Right. Okay.
I think student voice is really, really important, because I can have all of these great ideas.
Of course you can.
But they might think, yeah, miss, they're rubbish. So student voice is going to be a big thing.
Yeah.
And I do want to be able to gauge from the students through, we have our year group council meetings, we've got our core council, questionnaires and form time. I want to know from them, and that's why this first year is still very much a part of sitting back, having a look, working out how it all works, what's good, what's not so good. My perspective at the moment is obviously from that of a classroom teacher, rather than the person leading it. And for the classroom teachers whose rooming is disrupted and whose timetable is disrupted, is going to be a very different perspective from somebody that's leading it. So I'm aware of how various teachers feel about how sessions are delivered. But student voice is really important as well, and the feedback from the students. So that will be my starting point before I start implementing all of these amazing ideas that I think I've got. Student voice is where I will definitely start.
Okay.
And that will be my focus to begin with.
And you mentioned student council. Is student council quite strong in your school?
Yes, we have 2 representatives from every form group that go forward for year council. So mine are year 9 at the moment. We have 7 form groups. So there'll be 14 students that get together. It's all timetabled into the calendar, so we know exactly when these things are going to be happening. There are things that we're sent in advance to discuss, but the students are given their opportunity to give their views and their opinions on things, which I think are so very important. And then we have 2 people from each year group that then go forward into the core council as well. So there's that extra level. And I've always thought that student voice is really important. As an NQT, I helped run the student council in my first school, and then took it over in my second year. And it was really important. And I think they have so many wonderful ideas, and they see things from a different perspective. I was reading something last week that kind of hit home, that everybody's very down on teenagers at the moment. Oh, they don't interact, they're always on the internet, they're always on their phones. And my generation we're kind of this crossover generation, where my teenage years aren't documented, thankfully, anywhere on social media, because social media didn't exist. And my generation is perhaps the last generation that can remember it not being a thing and now being a thing. And I think we have to be really careful before we vilify teenagers and think, oh, they don't know how to communicate, they don't know how to interact. The pressures on them are completely different now to what they were before. And certainly in the next few years, as we recover from COVID, we just need to be a little bit gentle with them. And
absolutely.
That things are very, very different. And their experiences are very different. And they have very different skills. They have a completely different skill set to what previous generations have got as well.
And some teenagers do amazing things. Absolutely amazing things.
There are some teenagers out there who actually make me want to burst. And I think that's why I went into teaching, because there was this really negative stereotype that was portrayed within the media that they were just some hoodie wearing thugs who stand on street corners with knives threatening innocent pensioners as they go past. And that's not the reality. I'm not saying, unfortunately, there are going to be some that fit that stereotype. However, for the most part, that is not what teenagers are like. Yes, they have their sulky moments. Of course they do. We all do. Even as adults, we still have sulky moments. But they have so much to offer. And I love that. I love that I work with some students who make the world a better place.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they have so much to offer, and they make a difference in their communities. And I hope that my children grow up to be just as amazing as some of these children that I teach.
I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit because I'm a total advocate of student voice and everything that I do. But a criticism of student voice, particularly around the student council kind of concept of student voice, would be the challenging question would be around how do you make sure that every student's voice is heard? If you're going to listen to student voice, how do you make sure that those kids who perhaps are disengaged with education, perhaps are disengaged with the curriculum, perhaps don't believe it when teachers say, I want to know what you think. How do you make sure that you hear their voice about careers and career education?
This is where we have an absolutely fantastic support network in our school, in all fairness. We have some absolutely amazing TAs. Our TAs are absolutely amazing. And they work with our students on a completely different level. So we've got our learning centre as well. And for those who are perhaps a little bit disengaged, that's where our TAs really come into their own, because they are able to have these amazing conversations. So I think utilising the other professionals that there are around you and utilising other people's skills. Because even with our most difficult and disengaged students, there is still a member of staff or a member of the team that they still talk to. And our boys, especially, everybody has the disengaged boys and some of the really difficult boys. And we've got some fantastic TAs who they're not in their faces, they're not pressuring them. But being able to just drop it generally into conversation. And I think that makes a huge difference. We've got girls who are equally difficult. And sometimes you can, they'll just they'll be roaming around and you just have a chat to them, like an informal chat. So I think using the professionals around you is really important to get their voice heard in a different way, because they won't necessarily contribute in form time and say, I'll talk about this on student camp. They won't, and I know they won't, but definitely smaller group work and getting them even on a one-to-one basis, even if it's out in the playground at break time, there are ways and means of kind of gleaning that information.
To try and agree a topic of interest, I started with a question about what Shelley thought careers education was and what education was, where one started and one ended. In terms of career guidance and coaching practice, I signposted that question to tell Shelley why I was asking the question. That was in terms of agreeing on this topic of interest. Shelley talked about a wide variety of things. So her topic of interest was about young enterprise, it was about economic education, it was about skills, and at the end of that, I didn't feel like we'd identified a topic of interest. So I came back with another question. So I took her back to the interview. She'd introduced that in her answer to the first question. So I took her back to the interview and again tried to ask her what her one area of interest was. And from that one, we got apprenticeships, we got higher education, So I tried to channel it again. I referred back to the supportive leadership. She'd mentioned them quite a lot, that they weren't expecting her to go in and do lots and lots of things. And at that point, Shelley then talked about hands-on experience, wanting to make business links, talking about work experience. She mentioned the cultural capital. She talked about tutors and the tutor role. She talked about careers days, working alongside subject areas, work experience. And at that point, I used another kind of micro skill. I wanted to challenge her. I wanted to draw attention to a concern I had that when pressed to identify one topic area, Shelley wasn't able to identify one topic area, but she had lots and lots of areas of interest. So I used the tactic of sharing something that was in my head. I asked her if I said, I hope you don't mind. I didn't want this to feel like I was interrogating or questioning her professionalism or questioning her judgment. And I certainly didn't want to kind of exert any power in this in terms of suggesting to her that she should be focusing on something else. I just wanted to help her clarify in her own head. And then she came to student voice, and we spoke about student voice a little bit more. And again, there was a challenge in there because she was talking about student council, and I just wanted to clarify and just raise in her mind, through asking my question, get her to think about those kind of minority voices, particularly around the disengaged students who don't go to school council meetings. And we talked about that for a little time. It's quite difficult, this section. Usually a client would be coming for career coaching or career guidance because they had a problem that they wanted to solve, and that's clearly not quite the case here. So we're using the format of career guidance or career coaching in a slightly artificial way. But actually, I thought it led us to a point when we got to the final stage, which is agreeing on an action, something tangible that Shelley or I were going to go away and do as a result of our conversation. It was clear that having this conversation and me asking those challenging questions in the nicest way possible, so they didn't come across as authoritarian. Actually, when we got to the setting and action, I think Shelley hit the nail right on the head. And I think in part that was because we'd followed this framework and I'd used those micro skills to get her to think about it. We're moving on towards kind of the final section of this. Talked about all sorts of things. What do you take away from this that you think, actually, having had the airspace to talk about what I'm doing and try to pull all those ideas into some kind of order, when it comes to what I want to do with careers, what do you need to do next? What?
Make myself a checklist. Because I think almost in the same way that my husband's just sat down and written a 5-year plan for the off-road team, I'm thinking that I need to consider like a longer term plan in the same way that we were taught as students. You do your long term, your medium and your short term plans. I need to map out where I see this going within the next few years, so I know what my end targets are really. I mean, there's never going to be an end to it, obviously, because it's a role that will keep evolving and things will change. But certainly as to what I would like to do kind of longer term, I think that's particularly important. So I don't get carried away and overexcited and exhaust myself probably. Because I think that's easy to do as well. But I've been in this position before. I mean, being a head of department for psychology, the syllabus didn't exist.
Yeah.
And I wrote the entire 2-year syllabus myself. I made every PowerPoint, I made every resource, and it's quite intensive. So I think magpieing things from here, there and everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
To find what fits. So this year I will observe.
Yeah.
And take it all on board and do lots of learning from lots of different wonderful people. And then I can start mapping out where I'd like to go and what I want to do and putting my own spin on things as well.
Okay, good luck with the plan. It sounds like you are in the right role in the right school, and things are going really well for you. Good luck with everything that you're doing with careers. Obviously, well, I hope you're still going to follow me on Twitter, and I'm all up for sharing resources and ideas and stuff like that. So we will continue to be in touch, and then who knows, maybe one day we get to meet in the real world.
That would be super exciting.
If anybody ever lets us out to do that again, which would be good. It would be very nice.
Social distance, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So on that, I will leave you to the rest of your day, and thank you once again for your time.
Not a problem at all.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
And that was the interview. To summarise, in phase 1, we laid the foundation and established a rapport. There was plenty of laughter and lots of deep listening, and me giving Shelly plenty of time to talk. In phase 2, we explored Shelly's story, which helped me to understand some of the context behind Shelly, her work and her values. Allowing Shelly to explore her story, which overlapped into phase 3, enabled her to reflect on her own practice and thoughts to identify her action. Shelly's new to her role. She has lots of ideas to take careers forward as careers leader, and recognising the need for a strategic plan is clearly a positive way forwards. If you'd like to follow us on our fortnightly journey as we go careering into the liquid world of career education, go to www.cognogs.co.uk. My name's Rob Cooper, and you've been listening to Cognogs, a Career Ed podcast.